had huge personality and loved to perform for people. I had big dreams of becoming famous. Starting when I was just 3 years old, I had acted in a children's playhouse right down the street from my house. I slowly built my path to becoming a well-known child star at age 10. My family and I moved to Warsaw, Poland because my father was offered an amazing job opportunity. As for me, I was forced to move to a new school, much different than my other one. The first day was rough adjusting to the new rules. All the Jewish kids had to sit in the back of the class and were not given the comfort of chairs. I felt as if the Jews were being stereotyped by not giving us the same rights that all the other non-Jewish kids had. It was hard for me to focus in class because I was so uncomfortable on the floor. My back had aches and my butt went numb. As I went to school the next day, things got worse. The few friends I had made told me they were not allowed to associate with a Jew. This hurt me a lot and made me think of myself as something wrong. I began to feel as if I was the other. I didn't fit in and I wasn't good enough because I was Jewish. I told my mom everything that happened at school, and she allowed me to transfer to a school for Jewish kids in the local synagogue a few blocks down from our apartment. One day when I came home from school, my mom and dad explained to me how anti-Semitic propaganda began to spread because of the Germans. My mom explained how this affected us because our apartment was designated for Jews and we were supposed to wear a yellow cloth star on our clothes. We also had a curfew which allowed Jews on the streets for only 2 hours a day. I began to feel as if we were being shut off from the rest of the world. I kept telling myself that the war would be over soon and we would be free. I woke up to the sound of loud sirens blaring in the street. I looked out the window and saw a huge brick wall dividing the street in half. Thousands of people filled the streets, and I noticed big Nazi men in fancy outfits holding up red and white signs with an X-like mark. My family and I rushed out to see what was going on in our city. As we walked in the streets, I noticed signs reading, "Jews not welcome." The only comfort I had at this moment was my mom's hand holding me tight. As we kept walking through the chaos of the city, I began to cry as I saw the synagogue where I attended school burn down. My father's friend's store was burned down, along with the stores of many other Jews. This destruction went on for 2 nights, November 9th and 10th. We asked a Nazi soldier why there was a huge brick wall dividing the street, and he told us this was our new home. As he said these words to us, my heart dropped. I knew this could not be a good thing in any way possible. My mother, sister, and I were forced into a place called the ghetto. Our ghetto, the Warsaw Ghetto, was the largest, which held 400,000 people. Life in the ghetto was wretched. It was extremely overcrowded and hardly any room to breathe. We were forced to share rooms with at least 10 people. I met a girl named Sarah and we became instant friends, but not for long. One night we were being served the usual dinner, a piece of bread the size of my thumb, and Sarah asked if she could have some water because she felt very sick. A Nazi soldier walked over to her and shot her right in the head. I can't describe to you how much pain and anger was inside of me. I wanted to go up and beat that Nazi and make him suffer like no other. But I was forced to hold back my tears and vexation because if I didn't, he would kill me also. As we sat in the ghetto, my mother had a brilliant idea come to mind. She told us we would apply for a Swedish passport and find a safe home. We walked to a high-rise apartment building where we waited for a flight out of the country. This was the only time I had hope in a long time. However, as much as we tried, we were not able to make it to Sweden. As days passed in the ghetto, my mother, sister, and I were befriended by an SS officer. His name was Oscar. He kept us from starving, and every so often he would visit us at night and bring us food. He would randomly come over and give me a kiss on the cheek, which made me feel very uncomfortable. My mother and sister were abducted and taken to a concentration camp, leaving me all alone in the horrifying ghetto. I had no one. I was scared and had very little hope for survival. We were told we would be taken to a concentration camp in the morning. This made me so nervous. I decided to fake being dead and laid down on the floor. I wrote a suicide note and left it on my chest. I swallowed my breath to the point where the Nazis couldn't feel a pulse. Oscar found me and took me, and we hid in the sewers of the ghettos. I lived with him in the sewers for a few months. He told me he had feelings for me, but I did not feel the same way. He was not a nice person. He physically and mentally abused me. There was nothing I could do, so I dealt with the abuse to save my life. A few years had passed, and we decided to leave the sewers. We walked until we reached Warsaw. As I wandered through the streets of the ghetto, searching for my apartment, I turned a corner and never saw a sight more beautiful. I saw my mother and sister. Joy took over my face as I ran to hug them. I was so grateful to be back in the arms of my family. Later that day, we watched outside on the streets the announcement of the end of World War II.
This is a solemn but glorious hour. I wish that Franklin D. Roosevelt had lived to see this day. General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations.
Oscar then promised to keep us safe and move us to the U.S. if I would marry him. I had no choice but to say yes. Eventually, we moved to Cleveland. I handled the pain Oscar put me through to protect my mother and sister. I got pregnant twice. I now had a son and daughter. A few years later, Oscar died in 1985. Finally, I was released from all the pain and abuse he put me through. Later, I met Mr. Hertzer, who was also a Holocaust survivor that had lost all of his family. We had much in common, and it was love at first sight. We got married 2 months after we met. It took me until I was 60 years old to find and understand what love truly was.